Cameron's growing crisis over steel, with 15,000 jobs on the line. As Tata Steel insists it's selling its interests in Britain, he calls a meeting of key ministers, summoning one back from Australia.
I think there are buyers out there. It might require some kind of government support, and we are more than ready to look at all ways that we can provide commercial support to really secure the long-term future.
But visiting South Wales, the Labour leader claims the government is in disarray.
An awful lot of people in this country are looking very closely at this. They want to see government stepping up to the plate, accepting its responsibility to the entire community and intervening.
Also tonight, legal defeat for the family of Jean-Charles de Menezes, shot dead by police on the tube.
Why toddlers need teaching earlier than we thought.
Up in the air, but he's got a lot of it. Will it go all the way? Yes, it does. What a start.
Roy of the overs. England smashed their way to the World Cup final.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. David Cameron returns from holiday tonight and walks straight into the urgent problem of how to save Britain's steel industry. At stake are around 15,000 jobs. Mr Cameron's called a crisis meeting at Downing Street tomorrow, but has turned down a Labour demand to recall Parliament early.
As the ITV Evening News revealed last night, the government is considering financial aid to keep the industry afloat. But the Business Secretary, Sajid Javid, summoned back from Australia tonight, says full nationalisation is not a long-term solution. We'll get the very latest from South Wales and Downing Street in just a moment. But first, this report on the day's developments by our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
In the buildings of this vast site in Port Talbot and in Tata Steel's other plants in the UK, 15,000 people are waiting to hear what will happen to their jobs. What they want is a new employer. There is no guarantee that will happen. And into this town this afternoon arrived one politician, the Labour leader, who today called for and had rejected a recall of Parliament and pleaded with ministers to keep UK steel production alive.
An awful lot of people in this country are looking very closely at this. They want to see government stepping up to the plate, accepting its responsibility to the entire community and intervening. Protect the plant, protect the jobs, but above all, protect the industrial infrastructure of this country.
Tata Steel employs around 15,000 workers in the UK. Most work at the company's three main steel-making plants, Port Talbot in South Wales, Rotherham in South Yorkshire and Scunthorpe in Lincolnshire. But there are also 7 other Tata Steel sites across the country currently at risk. They include Corby, Hartlepool and Shotton. And with so many jobs on the line, you might ask, why was the Business Secretary on the other side of the world? This was a dinner-jacketed Sajid Javid in Sydney today.
It's a real pleasure to be here in Australia tonight.
But the pleasure did not last very long. Minutes later, it was decided he should come home to deal with the steel crisis here.
My engagement in Australia is a long-standing arrangement, and it's actually part of my job to promote jobs and growth. I've always been absolutely clear that if it's necessary and helpful for me to be back in London to help with this and to help look at the options, that's exactly what I do, and that is why I'm cutting my trip short.
So what options will be on the table when the Business Secretary comes back? Tata may find a buyer, but current market conditions make that extremely difficult. That may mean the government will have to intervene, perhaps buying a stake or part nationalising the business while a solution is sought. A third option would be a buyout by the managers and staff, who have already proposed a turnaround plan which Tata yesterday rejected. That rejection and the decision to sell was made at a meeting here in Mumbai, where board members concluded they could no longer sustain their losses in Britain.
We aren't able to afford the level of support that is required. Given the support that we've already taken, we've taken impairments of about £2 billion in the last few years.
There will be a meeting in Downing Street first thing tomorrow, but the options for Tata Steel's UK business are neither easy nor will they be quick. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, Port Talbot in South Wales is at the heart of the British steel industry, and the huge plant there, the very lifeblood of the town around it. Tonight, Port Talbot is a place with an air of bewildered desperation. The workers at the plant, their families, and the thousands whose livelihoods depend upon it today began their Save Our Steel campaign. Our correspondent Rupert Evelyn is there. Rupert.
Well, the one thing the workers wanted here was a settlement, a guarantee of their security. Instead, the status of this site is confused, and the owners, Tata, and the politicians can offer little in the way of clarity. And for the people of Port Talbot, they are afraid for their future. The steelworks are under threat, but for now they're still firing. The torpedoes still carrying molten iron to turn into steel. But the heat in this plant, usually contained in the blast furnace, has spilled out. Workers are now battling for their livelihoods. A town is fighting for its future. Details on the fate of this site are sparse, and as the day began, it was apparent that uncertainty fuels insecurity.
There was a lot of uncertain futures in there. People have been told they haven't got a job. It's terrible times, so...
You know, there's a hard-working workforce in there, well-qualified, well-trained. You know, and to lose those jobs is devastating.
There's bound to be somebody out there who'll think there's an opportunity, even if, you know, we slimline, we improve it, make it more attractive. You know, we've got to go through these, it's going to be rough.
It is 3 miles from one end of this site to the other. The footprint is vast, and so too are the issues faced by the thousands of workers dependent on a paycheck from this industry.
We thought that meeting yesterday was to talk about a turnaround plan, which our management had proposed, and apparently the outcome of it is to sell the whole of the UK business. And I think that's the overwhelming thing today. People are kind of shell-shocked. Do we really want to live in a country that can't produce its own steel for infrastructure projects, for defence? I just find it amazing that a country thinks it's acceptable to not have an industrial strategy, not have a manufacturing strategy.
Those who live and work here are looking to politicians for support. Ultimately, that will mean Westminster, as the Welsh Government do not have pockets deep enough.
Well, we've already put a financial package on the table. That will stay, but there will need to be a package from the UK Government as well. There'll need to be private investment. I mean, we're talking about a substantial amount of money here. We don't have the resources ourselves to put the kind of package on the table that would be required.
Words will not do. It has to be action, say the unions.
The government has kept saying all the way through that, you know, we will help, we will stand by you. David Cameron stood in the House of Commons and said, we will stand by steel. Please stand by steel then.
Steel production is still at the heart of this town, but with Tata describing it as a burden on their balance sheet, it is materially weaker today than it was yesterday. No one has yet called time, but equally, so far, there is no saviour. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Port Talbot.
Let's return then to our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp, in Downing Street. So, Chris, as Rupert was saying there, some options, but no clear way ahead. And, of course, the clock is ticking.
Yes, Mark, indeed it is. And I suspect we're in for a period of hyperactivity from government now. They've rather been caught on the hop over the last 24 hours. You've had the Prime Minister on his Easter holidays in Lanzarote. You've had the Business Secretary, as you saw in my report, on the other side of the world in Australia. It rather did feel like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and certainly at the wrong kind of black tie event. Nevertheless, Downing Street are quite clear that the Prime Minister's been in discussions. He's had a chat on the phone this evening with the First Minister of Wales. He is coming back. The Business Secretary is also coming back, as we said. There's a meeting here first thing tomorrow morning that the Prime Minister will chair with key ministers. And on the table, clearly, is a decision on how far they will go on this issue of state intervention. We said on this programme last night that we know one of the options is some form of state ownership, even if that were a very temporary state ownership. The Business Secretary has made it quite clear today that long-term nationalisation is not an option. They do have to somehow use state money, government money, to get this company, to get this business to some sort of viable commercial operational future.
Right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Now, 11 years ago, an innocent Brazilian man, Jean Charles de Menezes, was shot dead on the tube by police officers who mistook him for a would-be suicide bomber. Ever since, his family has fought for charges to be brought over his death, a long legal struggle that finally ended today in failure. The European Court of Human Rights ruled that Britain was right not to charge any officer. Paul Davis has the story.
His death was a tragic case of mistaken identity. The police believe Jean-Charles de Menezes was a suicide bomber. They were dreadfully wrong. But should the officers who shot him face a court? His family said yes. But today, the European Court of Human Rights said no.
That there has been no violation of the procedural limb of Article 2 of the Convention.
I feel sad, very, very sad and disappointed. They don't do the right thing because they kill an innocent man.
It was July 2005. London on a heightened state of security just 2 weeks after the July 7 attacks, 24 hours after a second failed attempt to bomb the Underground. Jean-Charles, a Brazilian electrician, had been followed from a building in South London where it was believed bombers were hiding. Anti-terror police tracked him, catch a bus, and then enter Stockwell Underground station. When he headed for the platform, armed officers sprinted after him. They caught him on a train and, following their rules of engagement, shot and killed him before he could detonate the explosives they wrongly believed he was carrying. When the Crown Prosecution Service looked into the possibility of bringing charges against the armed officers who pursued Jean-Charles de Menezes into this tube station, they reached the conclusion that the policeman had honestly believed there was an imminent threat of another suicide bombing. And therefore, there was no realistic prospect of gaining a successful conviction. In today's judgment, the European Court of Human Rights supports that decision. To have done otherwise would have openly challenged the Metropolitan Force's rules of engagement. It was 2006 when the Crown Prosecution Service refused to prosecute the police marksman who shot dead Jean-Charles de Menezes. 2 years later, an inquest jury returned an open verdict after the coroner told them a ruling of unlawful killing was not available to them. A year later, the police watchdog announced that the officers would escape punishment. Now, a decade after his killing, the European Court of Human Rights judgment appears to end the family's campaign.
I think it's everything finished now. It's a 10 years, the painful 10 years, I think finished now.
The family already have an apology and an undisclosed cash settlement from Scotland Yard. They hope, if nothing else, their campaign may have reduced the chances of such an awful mistake happening again. Paul Davis, ITV News.
The family of a Glasgow shopkeeper killed outside his shop last Thursday say they are devastated by his death. In a tribute today, relatives described Asad Shah as a brilliant man who treated everyone with the utmost kindness and respect. A 32-year-old man from Bradford has been charged with his murder.
The hijacker who threatened to blow up an Egyptian plane with what turned out to be fake explosives appeared in court today and confirmed his motives were personal ones. He told magistrates what someone's supposed to do when he hasn't seen his wife and children in 24 years. Meanwhile, a British passenger who took a smiling selfie standing next to the hijacker is due back home tonight. Ben Chapman has more.
Psychologically unstable, more concerned with a family feud than a terrorist outrage, was how Saif Eldin Mustafa was described after arriving at court in Cyprus this morning, charged with hijacking, abduction and explosives offences.
The suspect presented today before the court and he will stay in custody for 8 days.
He asked police, what is someone to do when they haven't seen their family for 24 years? His answer, it seems, was to use a fake suicide belt to hijack a plane, leaving a letter for his wife on the tarmac as he left following a 6-hour standoff. But not before posing for a picture with one of his captives, Ben Innes from Leeds, who told a newspaper he'd tried to stay cheerful during the ordeal, assuming he'd have nothing to lose if the bomb was real. Despite accusations he was irresponsible, friends at the pub back home in Yorkshire say it fits with the man they know.
He's always got a big grin on his face, sort of sense of humour's hilarious, and yeah.
He's a bit of a joker.
Bit of a joker, yeah.
Were you surprised at all when you saw the papers?
No. This morning when I woke up, I was like, looked on the news. That's Ben.
But before Ben was eventually released and seen here in the blue shirt, he'd also been texting his mother, who thought he was in grave danger, When asked about the photo, she told ITV News, "We are relieved beyond explanation that Ben and everyone is safe and well. We do not know the facts about this as we've not spoken to Ben at any great length. All we know is he is now safe and looking forward to coming home." The hijacker may be heading home too, to Egypt, where the public prosecutor has demanded he be returned, despite Mustafa's claims of victory as he left court. Ben Chapman, ITV News.
Still to come in the ITV Evening News, teaching for toddlers before they go to school. Scientists say it could improve their life chances.
Also a painful defeat for England's women, but a big win for the men in the T20 semi-finals in India.
And the postmaster who went on a 600-mile round trip just to deliver a letter he'd forgotten to send.
Good on him.
Yeah, good on him. Those stories and more after this very short break, Johnston. Hello and welcome back. Now, a leading children's charity is tonight calling for a qualified teacher to be employed in every nursery to help stop thousands of toddlers falling behind. A report by child health experts claims more than 100,000 children in England alone struggle to keep up by the time they actually get to school. The reason, say the scientists, is the lack of mental stimulation during their preschool years. Here's more now from Sally Lockwood.
Nursery is a golden window for learning. Without the right stimulation here, a toddler can be set back for life. And this is how neuroscientists have conducted their research. Olive's brain is being scanned, revealing how much more she's stimulated while she's being read to.
We find that children who don't get much social interaction, who don't get spoken to very much or engaged with verbally, they tend to start speaking themselves later. But the problem with that really is not so much that they start language later, but that they may never properly catch up.
Scientists call them the light bulb years, when children's brains should be stimulated with talking, word games and music. But for some children, that encouragement to learn is missing. Last year in England, 6 children in every reception class fell behind with speech and language skills. Now, Save the Children is calling for a qualified early years teacher in every nursery to combat the problem. But experts say that's a tall order, with a shortage of teachers across the country.
The call for high quality work and practitioners within schools is essential. I'm just a tad concerned that when we talk about these key skills that these very young children should be engaged in, that truly does stimulate brain development, that we're really talking about creative activities.
And for many parents, it's a minefield, with nearly half said to have too low an expectation of their toddler's speech.
He didn't speak from like 1, which is a rough guideline that I thought. We got told that 2, before it needed to be 2 before any concerns that could be raised.
Probably got a fairly good idea of what they should be doing at what time, but sometimes you forget as well from one child to another.
How's he gone?
Experts don't want playtime overshadowed, but say the right kind of stimulation at nursery can shape the course of a toddler's life. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
Well, other news now, and Vodafone was today named as the most complained about pay monthly mobile provider. The regulator Ofcom says complaints doubled in the last 3 months of 2015. Vodafone has apologised, blaming problems with a switch to a new billing system.
The historical drama Wolf Hall leads the nominations for this year's BAFTA Television Awards. Its star Mark Rylance is nominated in the leading actor category and will be up against Idris Elba, who has earned his first BAFTA TV nomination for his role in Luther.
And Gary Neville has been sacked as manager of the Spanish club Valencia. He's won just 3 games and admits the results were just not good enough.
England's men cricketers bludgeoned their way into the World T20 final tonight with a big win over New Zealand. Opener Jason Roy top scored with 78 off just 44 balls. But things didn't go quite so well for England's women's team, who lost their semi-final to Australia. Our sports correspondent Ian Payne watched both games.
England have come a long way since their feeble effort in the last World Cup, but they struggled early on in the semi-final as New Zealand made a powerful start, Colin Munro improvising brilliantly. But gradually the rate slowed down with a succession of wickets, including 2 in a row for Ben Stokes.
Ball fall down the ground again. Anybody near this? Yeah, Jordan!
England began brilliantly with Jason Roy blazing golf shots. He hit it so hard he had to change his equipment.
He's got his back.
But then a wobble as Roy was bowled for 78. Captain Owen Morgan went LBW next ball. But it merely forestalled the close as Jos Buttler clubbed England to victory for a final against either India, the hosts, or the West Indies.
Brilliant from England.
Earlier in the day and on the same ground, England's women were knocked out in the semi-final by Australia. England's bowler, Natalie Siver, was almost knocked out by her own teammate, Catherine Brunt. Australia set England a gettable 133 to win. They began well, Tammy Beaumont leading the charge. But as wickets fell, their chase petered out to leave them just short, beaten by the Australians for the 3rd tournament in a row.
So joy for Australia.
Ian Payne, ITV News.
And finally, if your faith in human nature has taken a bit of a battering recently, this might just help. It is a good news tale of a postmaster from Cornwall and his epic quest to do the right thing.
Yes, David Shepherd travelled more than 300 miles, taking 4 trains and a car through the night to make sure an important letter arrived on time. Then he had to get back again. Olivia Kinsley explains.
Okay, just first class for that one. That's fine, yeah. Excellent.
David Shepherd strives to run an efficient, reliable shop. So when he forgot to post a customer's passport, only one option remained.
First thing that went through my mind is I have to get it there. Went straight online, looked at the train times, thought, well, I can get to Exeter by 1 o'clock.
After closing up the post office at 10 p.m, David drove from his home in the Cornish village of Stratton to get the last train from Exeter at 1:06 a.m. After arriving in London, he took a tube journey across the city and boarded the train to Ashford in Kent at 6:40 before changing and travelling to Rye in Sussex. After a 20-minute walk in the pouring rain, David finally arrived at the address at just after 8 a.m. to deliver the package by hand. The recipient, Sally Compton, was astounded.
He explained how he'd come up and I was just completely gobsmacked. In fact, so much so that I didn't even offer him a cup of tea. I feel very guilty. And he trudged off down in the rain to go and get the next train back.
The passport belonged to Sally's brother Hugh. He lives in David's village and is a regular in the shop.
I knew Hugh travelled a lot, and I thought if he needs his passport there, if he's asked his neighbour to go in and get it for him and send it in the post, I knew that he'd need it. I thought I can't let him miss his flight.
Passport received, Hugh's now abroad. His wife says he's hugely grateful.
Absolutely thrilled, so surprised and delighted, and I suppose it just said an awful lot about David here, that he would go to those lengths.
Cheers there, thanks a lot, see you tomorrow.
It's one not so small gesture that will warm many hearts. Olivia Kinsley, ITV News.
No cup of tea?
Unbelievable.
That's it for now. Tom Bradby will be here at 10.
From all the team here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.